This episode of the BREWtally Speaking podcast is brought to you by On Point Pomade. Keep your beard and hair looking on point with their line of pomades and beard oils over at onpointpomade.com. Use our code BSP15 at checkout and get 15% off your total purchase order. So thanks again to On Point Pomade for sponsoring our show. This episode is also sponsored by the Bean Bastard Coffee. Head over to thebeanbastard.com and pick up any one of their delicious hand-roasted coffees. Coffee lovers will also enjoy their hand-cut and handmade espresso candles and soaps as well. If you're in the Buffalo, New York area, head to their store located at 448 Elmwood Avenue. And thanks again to the Bean Bastard for supporting this show. The Speaking podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia.com. With over 500,000 officially licensed items in their online store, you're guaranteed to find something you need. Use our code BREWtally and get 10% off your total purchase order. Now on to the show.
People say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing. This rings true because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard. And you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, and if you're not having fun doing it, you're gonna give
up. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the BREWtally Speaking podcast. I am your host, John, and this episode's guest is Justin Van Hook, formerly of Sleeping with Sirens. This was actually a really interesting chat. Justin and I had met several times here locally in Grand Rapids, a lot of times at shows and pre- and post-shows over at the Tin Can, which is usually, it is across the street from where one of the venues is here in town, and a lot of times I'd see him, and it'd be one of those things where I'm like, I feel like I know who this dude is, but like I don't know why I know who this dude is. And it was something where like a lot of our mutual friends were always like, hey, you guys probably know each other, and I was like, we see each other. And it wasn't until Memphis Mayfire was in town, and Matty went to hang out with us after the show, and then was like, hey, have you met Justin? And I was like, no. Like, it was the first time we'd officially been introduced, and it was one of those where we were both like, yeah, I mean, you look familiar. I see you around all the time, but I don't really know who you are. And then Matty was like, oh, John has a podcast. I've been on a couple times, and then he was explaining that Justin used to be in Sleeping with Sirens, and I was like, oh, okay. So it was one of those things where it makes me feel really stupid to say it like this, but I really didn't realize that Sleeping with Sirens was basically living here in Grand Rapids or Muskegon, kind of adjacent, just kind of, in the area. I always, for some reason, thought that they lived anywhere but here, honestly. So it was one of those things where just getting to kind of talk with Justin, talk with someone that I honestly don't know much about. But like I said, Matty was just kind of like, oh, you guys should maybe, do the podcast together. And I was like, all right, I'm down to talk to whoever. And it was kind of funny because in doing this, I realized that Justin is probably the most reluctant musician, skilled person I have ever met. The dude just knows how to do so many things and do it so well and at a very high level, but just has no inclination to want to do it at that level at all. Like, just, I mean, you're in a band, and the fact that, like, when most people leave, like, the band they're known for being in, they start something else, whether it's just even a fun little side project with friends, and the fact that he's like, yeah, I just don't really want to do that, and then it's like, you find out he has all these other hobbies that he's really talented at, he's like, yeah, I don't really want to do that for a profession either. It's so interesting to see someone be so, I don't know, just so skilled at so many things, but not have the penchant to turn that into something. I mean, it's quite the opposite of what I'm used to seeing or hearing from people. But I find it wildly fascinating. Like, ever since this chat, like, I've been sitting on this chat for a while because, like, there's nothing in it like some of the other ones where it's like, oh, a record's coming out or whatever, so it needs to coincide with that. So I've been able to kind of push it back. But it is one of those where I've just been very still thinking about just, I guess sometimes you can be really good at something and all it is just for you. It doesn't need to be anything more than that. And I've been really kind of trying to figure out how to maybe apply that same philosophy to my own life. Because I do think maybe we oftentimes don't do that. I think we try to find a way to, the old saying of like, if you do something you love, you never have to work a day in your life. And I feel like at times that also puts unnecessary stress on this thing that we love doing. And it's just for maybe a friend or just something we tinker around with, but we don't always need to make something bigger than it needs to be. You can be content with making it just this thing and it's only for you. So I've really kind of thought about that a lot since this conversation, but this is a long conversation, so I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Let's get into it with Justin, and I'll talk to you on the other side of it. People are like, oh, as you get older, like you just wake up hungover, and you're like, no, not if you do it right. A lot of it is actually
I wake up hungover and I'll wake up hungover and I didn't even have anything to drink the night before. Just my body just feels like I'm drunk.
Well, I was gonna say you have kids, so I feel like there's like a body hangover of just having to keep up with little ones at such a young age as you get older. And it's a lot of bending over, so your back's probably constant. That's why I think adults and parents are just like, my back.
Yeah. Yeah. I seriously thought about getting it removed completely, so I don't have to bring it back.
Could be like, who was it? Tyson. It's my back. I broke it. It's spinal. And it's like as he's literally standing after fighting someone, and you're like, "What was that? You broke your back? It's spinal." No, I mean, so it's funny because like a lot of people when they do this, when get recommended, I guess I should say, everyone's like, "Hey, he's got a podcast," and I think everyone just assumes that it's an interview. And I used to do that, and then like it was kind of funny because in going to therapy a couple years ago, it was one of those things where I realized that in the podcast, I do exactly what I was doing in my life, which is like I would start with a question, and then it might be like, well, that's not really a good first question. That's kind of like when you're in the middle, let's build around it and almost creative story, like a creative writing exercise. And then, I'd ask someone something on my list of questions, but then maybe there'd be an interesting tangent that, would be better to follow. But I would be like, nope, got to shoehorn back into what I've already prepared because I'm leading you somewhere. And it's like, that's not how life works. And that's not how a conversation should work. So I was like, let's stop doing that. Just kind of see what happens. And on top of that is, as I'm sure maybe you're aware of from your time in doing interviews in the time in the band, sometimes you preemptively get the questions from the person, so that way before you go in, you're already prepped and ready and have like your perfect answer. And part of me is like that part of it's kind of disingenuous too, because it's like, well, you already had time to prepare for the question versus kind of like literally having a spontaneous conversation. So I think it's just more fun, and it lets people get to know you.
Yeah, totally agree.
So you're correct me if I'm wrong, and don't give me like specifics, but like you're in Muskegon, aren't you?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. I spend some time in Muskegon, obviously around the summertime for the lakes and stuff, but how is it living there? Because it just living here, it's like it seems like I like it because it's there's always something to do. But when I go to Muskegon, it feels like everything is just so slowed down that I feel like either that's why you love it, or it's kind of I kind of hate it and I want to move a little bit closer, but Grand Rapids is expensive to live in.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of like the best of all worlds here because I live really, really close to lake distance, or it's just a short 30-minute drive to downtown Grand Rapids, or I can, an hour north and you're in the woods, deep in the woods. And then I can go to Grand Haven. I just feel like if I'm in Grand Rapids, I'm like from the lake, or, you're kind of, unless city living is like your priority, I like Muskegon because I've got a good downtown that I can ride my bike to, breweries and so on. Or, I can hop on my bike and get right into the beach. So to me, it's a little bit of everything.
It's always interesting because, like, when you think of, typically to me, when you see touring people and, kind of someone that sort of kind of put the two of us together recently was Matty from Memphis and Memphis Mayfire, for those that don't know. And so it was one of those where, we went out to go hang out with him and his wife over at Froggy's when we were out in Tennessee. And it's funny because I feel like as I'm starting to kind of get to know some of my friends that are in the touring side of things, that's kind of what they do. They kind of don't want the city life anymore. They kind of want to be tucked back a little bit away from everything and just have the quiet and the lack of, I guess, busyness, because that's sort of what their life is. But I guess it makes me wonder if that's sort of what kind of has drawn you to it, as well as just, the hustle and bustle of when you used to tour, and kind of just having that nice reprieve of just like solace and kind of being away from everything.
Definitely plays a large part in it. And I mean, definitely plays a large part. And I mean, I've lived and grown up in Muskegon my whole life. Granted, there was a while where I was touring there and, being away, in only big cities for an extended period of time. Definitely at first I was like, oh wow, like this is amazing. Like it'd be sweet to live downtown. But then it gets old. It's busy and loud and you've got no room, no privacy. There's just a lot of things that I just don't like. And I think the privacy thing is big, especially for people who are, in the spotlight, like this, like if you can live in a suburb that's, 40, I think he lives 40 minutes from downtown. You're not going to get bothered. You can just hang out at your home, grill out back, and not have to worry about people where you live, or I don't know.
It kind of makes me wonder, because I know you've not been, and correct me if I'm wrong, because like it's funny, you and I know a lot of people, and I think as we were saying when we were at Tin Can, you and I have a lot of people, and a lot of people that were like, you should have Justin on, or you should know Justin, or do you know Justin? And so for a while, it was one of those that peripherally I knew of you, but like I was just like, oh, I assume he's just like a lot of the people, like just goes to shows, probably is in some band. And I honestly didn't know that you were in, a band or what band you were in until somewhat recently. And it was one of those things that I kind of was reminded, and I was trying to think who it is, but I think, do you have a sister?
Mm-mm.
No. Okay. Then, okay. So there was someone I used to work with when I worked, and this is kind of a Muskegon reference, when I worked at Plums for a little bit. And this person that was like my district manager was like, I thought she said her brother, but I guess someone in her family, she was like, oh, he's in Sleeping with Sirens. And I was like, oh, that's very weird. Cause I didn't associate that band with being remotely from here. So I was like, weird, cool for you though. But it was one of those that like, it's funny in doing the show. Sometimes people are like, oh, you must love this band. And I got an email yesterday or a couple of days ago, and it was like one line drawing or something like that. And they were like, oh, like they're coming back. And Jonah, whoever that is, I assume it's the singer. They're like, this guy has been in so many bands. He's done so many things. I think you would love to talk to him. And I just honestly replied back to the email. I was like, I know of that band in name only. I have no idea who that dude is. I have no idea what he's done. And I was like, and it's actually been something we've talked about, some other podcasters and just people in general and myself, where I go, I think there was an era and an age that you hit where it's either you kind of were into new metal and went hardcore and like metalcore, or you went new metal and then kind of went post-hardcore screamo. And then you kind of maybe came back like to, and for peripherally some of the other bands with things like a Warped Tour or, Mayhems and stuff like that, you might have gotten some sprinklings of some of the other bands that would have kind of traversed through that. And I was like, but I was at those times looking for the heaviest of the heavy. So there's a lot of bands like that I just missed and were not like on my radar at all. And it was one of those where when someone was like, oh yeah, Sleeping with Sirens. And I was like, I know of that band, but I have absolutely no idea like anyone who, like, you could probably bring me anybody from that band, and I'd just be like, that's somebody. And it's funny because a lot of people are just like, well, yeah, and it's like some people are just like, how do you not know these people? And I'm like, I don't know, I just don't know. Like, and it's nothing against that, but I feel like that's kind of the funny thing, as I've been saying, is, you know, the nice thing as you get older is you kind of let go of some of these preconceived notions of like what you should be listening to, and you can catch back up with what you missed and maybe discover really awesome shit that you missed in that time. Yeah. And it's one of those that I think, you know, it's funny to reflect back on a younger you and just be like, oh, I wouldn't listen to that because it's too high pitched screaming or whatever, like preconceived thing that you have against it. But it's one of those things where I just kind of wonder for you, kind of going back to where I started, with you kind of being in the band, and I think you were at Tech as well for a little bit, that, you know, finding who you are after all of that's done. Like, was there a bit of a I don't want to say a growing pain, but kind of a figuring out process for you? Like, when that part of your life is done, who am I now?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was super brutal. It was definitely an identity crisis in a way. I had gotten married, and, you know, getting married and then a week later, 2 weeks later, having to leave for Europe, you know, and it's like, 2 months. And then it just, over the course of the year, it's just like, man, how is this sustainable? And, you know, Kellen was married, and then he had a kid, and, you know, he was struggling, and I'm like, dang, this doesn't have, I was like, this, I enjoy it a lot, but this ruined me. Like, it would have ruined me. I would not be married right now, but I love my wife. And so I had to give it up. And I mean, yeah, coming off of it and finding work and like being able to, people for me, like, I'm like, it's like, oh, I was just touring for 3 years, and like, you're just a normal person. Not saying that they're any less than me. I'm just saying, like, I was touring for 3 years. Like, you don't, like, I can't relate, you know? And I just had trouble, like, even connecting with my friends, you know, when I was home. Like, I just felt so disconnected. And it took me 5 years probably to, like, really, like, okay, this is, like, I just forget about that. The memories were great. And, you know, that's what it was. It was a phase of life that I moved on from, and I still talk to all those people, and they're still my best friends, but that's all it is, I guess. I don't know. I think about who are, like, you know, in the service, and they come back, you know, and they were in Afghanistan or something. And I can't imagine what that's like, being stationed for years and years and then coming back and like, hey, you got to live a normal life now. Don't be weird, you know, or else, you know, it's like crazy.
I think that part of it has been something I've thought about so much as I get older myself. And it's like, you know, a lot of bands, and I don't think we think about it really from this perspective, but I feel like, you know, a lot of bands get signed when they're young, you know, maybe right out of high school or even in high school. Yeah. And you start living this life that's not normal. And it's at such a point in your life where you're typically figuring out who you are as a person and what you want to do and who you're going to become. And, you know, those experiences that you're going through shape that. And to live in such an unnatural space, conditions, I can't help but like think about what that does to you at that point in your life, but then to also come home and try to adapt to a normal home life. You know, I just feel like there's so much of that it's like, you know, everyone's circumstances make them who they are. But when you kind of are in these weird circumstances, it's like, how do you assimilate to normal, quote unquote, normal living? And I often think about what that does to the people that are in it. And if they have like trust issues, because, you know, it's like, all right, do you actually want to be friends with me? Are you actually being nice to me because we are friends and we have common things? Or are you trying to get something off of me down the road? Or just hey, I know this person, so therefore there's credibility or clout.
Amongst I mean, not only with yeah, your fans or people that you meet at the bar, but also with the people, your peers, the people that you're on tour with. I mean, yeah, with these people for a month or two, and then you see them in a year when you maybe tour with them or at a festival, you see them. It's like these relationships that are so fickle. And yeah, like even like the opener bands, like, I don't know. It's very difficult. And then on top of that, all the people, everybody, wants to be you, it's like, oh man, like, nice to meet you. Like, and you're thinking, wow, all they want to do, like, it could be like somebody in a local band, like they want to be where I'm at. I'm kind of a celebrity. So on top of your already extremely non-normal life of touring, you're also being like put on a pedestal, and it's just a bad combination. I mean, it really is. It's crazy.
It's funny. I was talking with someone the other day. I'm going to kind of try to keep this as somewhat vague as possible, but when the Dance Gavin tour rolled through, actually, again, the same day of when we actually first met, I was hanging out with Andrew from Dance Gavin and getting dinner, and he had kind of filled my wife, well, mainly me, in on what's been going on. And obviously a lot of heavy shit has been going on with that band over the last, few months. And, he's kind of filling me in on a lot of the actual details of what's been going on. And my wife, who has never met him, this is like her first 20 minutes with him, is just, having all of this stuff be told to her. And I was telling a friend, I was like, I sometimes feel kind of bad for my wife, because like she just gets thrown into the deep end of like a few years of, interactions and friendships and all this kind of stuff, and then just gets like bombarded with these like huge things that are like really, like, when you're listening to it, you're just like, holy shit. But a friend of mine was like, actually, I'm kind of envious of her, because like she doesn't care most of the time about like who the person is or any of these stories. She's just like, oh, that's crazy. But it's one of those where they were like, she actually kind of is in an interesting position where she doesn't have to like go through all those years of just mundane, like, hey, how are you doing? Da, da, da. It's like, she gets to hear these wild, crazy stories, but it's also great. And you have a great spouse, because she doesn't care. She probably doesn't even know anybody that you guys are talking about, but you also know that she's not going to go blab and tell anyone either. But it's such an interesting thing that your wife gets to live kind of through you, in proximity of you doing this and the friends you have, of just having these really interesting and unique experiences. And it's kind of really made me think about that, like, just how because of being attached to me and married to me, that like, she has this life that a lot of her friends, that when she's like, oh, I went and hung out with, guys in a Atreyu, and they're like, oh my God, how did that happen? Did you pay for that? Oh no, my husband knows like the bass player or whatever. And it's like, and it's one of those, like, I've never thought about the attachment of like your spouse and living kind of indirectly in the life with you, or the life that you've kind of made in this industry. And, you had kind of talked about, your wife and so forth. And so it's like one of those where I kind of, as you were saying that, it kind of has made me wonder, what's it like from her perspective? Because, does she enjoy actually going out to hang out with all your band friends and shit? Or is it more like mine, where she's just like, yeah, I'm going and I'm hanging out with you, but I don't really necessarily care about these people.
Yeah. I mean, she doesn't really care. I mean, she didn't really listen to that style of music. I mean, she did a little bit back in the day, Taking Back Sunday and so on, Under Oath. But yeah, I don't know. She finds it fascinating and like exciting. But yeah, I would say for the most part, she's really chill about it and doesn't care too much. There's times where like we would practice at this at Soundcheck in Nashville, and like Keith Urban was there, and she loved Keith Urban, and it was like very difficult for her not to go, hi Keith Urban. And his wife, Keith Urban's wife was there, Nicole Kidman was there at Soundcheck, and Lindsay like went to the bathroom, and then Nicole Kidman walked in behind her, and they both sat down and started peeing. She was like, I'm peeing with Nicole Kidman right now, and I'm not supposed to say anything. I can't say anything. I can't take a picture. Not of her peeing, obviously, but
yeah, right.
freaks out. So that was, I mean, if they're like, yeah, then she freaks out. But otherwise, I feel like you have to kind of be involved in the music a little bit to really appreciate it.
Do you feel like, because I feel like at times, because of my wife's demeanor toward a lot of this, that it kind of, that sort of rubs off on me and makes me not be maybe as, not as excited, but just kind of like, oh, okay, like maybe this is just a thing. Like I don't need to react a different way to it. Like, did you find that it maybe has made you more grounded in situations where maybe you would be a little bit jaded to the experience of what you're doing or whatever?
So you're asking if she's made me more grounded or more jaded?
I guess, well, actually, yeah, I guess these are contrasting words, but I was going to say, so I guess for like I said, for me, like at times, like if I, like when I might think of something where I'm like, oh, this is like just how it is, but like kind of seeing something through your wife's eyes, either you get excited about something because you realize it's not just an everyday thing and you should be excited about it. Or in the adverse, I guess sometimes if you get too excited about something, your spouse is kind of there to be like, hey, it's just kind of bring it down, because they know you. And so they're kind of like, hey, you're being a bit much right now. Just kind of bring it down.
She probably tries to hype me up because I'm like, oh, like I don't, yeah, like even going to that show that I met you at, like I didn't find out about that. I just, Maddie's a great friend of mine, but like I so don't follow Memphis Mayfire enough to where I didn't even know until like 5:30 that he was even playing, 45 minutes from me. So like, yeah, I probably should be more supportive, I guess. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think like that's the funny thing too. Like, when I was messaging you before going like, oh, are you going to be at the Wage War show? I was meeting up with some people, and what was funny is someone was like, oh, who are you excited to see tonight? I was like, I legitimately don't know who's even on this show. I was like, my wife wanted to go. I bought tickets. And I was like, it's like Marshawn Lynch. I'm just here so I don't get fined. And even to the point where, like, when Wage War was going on, we would go out afterward with some friends, and she was like, oh, the dog. And I was like, I'll leave. I'll go right now. I'm fine. We've already seen Wage War like 3 times in the last year. I don't need to be here. I wouldn't have come if you didn't want to be here. And it was fine. Like I enjoyed going, but like I'm kind of the same way to a degree where like at times I'm just like, I'd rather just like stay home and do nothing, or at least do something other than being in a cramped room with a bunch of sweaty people who stink and are touching me.
Yeah, I really do not, unless it's like, I can't think of, I honestly, right now, I can't think of one band that I would even drive to go. No, I can't think of any. Maybe Thrice, but I don't think so.
They're playing in Detroit in a couple of weeks.
I just don't like, that is way too far. It's just too loud, and like, if I knew somebody, like the only reason I would go to a show is if like, I'm like, man, I finally get to see that dude. I haven't seen him in so long. That's the only time I go. Yeah, I don't know why. I think I just got burnt out.
Well, it's funny you say that on a couple of things, actually, talking about how, you want to go just to see someone because you haven't seen them. A lot of, I have a lot of friends in different bands, and a lot of people who are even not in bands, but like behind the scenes stuff, like, teching or lighting director or whatever, TMing even. And people, it's so interesting when you kind of get more into the world of the music industry or music business or whatever, that there are people who don't understand why I would drive to Detroit to go see a friend, because I'm like, it's maybe 1 or 2 times I'll get to see that person this whole year or maybe longer.
Yeah.
And so to maintain the friendship, you'll go do that, because it's like, well, don't you make sacrifices to, I don't want to say sacrifices, don't you make the effort to maintain a friendship and a relationship if it's valuable to you?
Sure. So
why wouldn't you go do this thing? But it's funny because there are people who are like, oh, like, how was this show? And I'm like, I don't know. I sat in the lobby and hung with my friend all night. And they're like, you didn't even watch the show? I was like, not at all.
Yeah, that would be me for sure.
But you had kind of also touched on something else that I think is interesting, and I don't know if I've really not talked about it a lot on this show, but the fatigue or burnout of going to shows, like not just wanting to go to them anymore because it's what you did for so long, that I feel like that's something that is real. And I know a lot of touring people who are like, I don't want to go to a show because like that's all I did or that's all I do. So I actually want to do the opposite of that for while I'm home or whatever. But it does make me wonder, when you go to shows, is it a little bit hard at times because maybe you get that sense of like, I kind of miss doing this?
Yeah. I would say so. It's not for me. It's not even the being on stage. It's being. I love and like I ran monitors in front of house too, but like the teching was a lot of fun to me. I went out with Jelly Roll in October, and I hadn't been out in a long time, and they needed somebody, so they fired the dude, and Jack from Sleeping was like, dude, will you come out? And I was like, hell yeah. So I dusted off my old Pelican case, grabbed some tools, and headed out. But that was I guess besides but I would say that kind of sparks that. I'm like, oh man, remember that? That was pretty fun. But the show itself, standing out in the crowd, I'm like, hell no.
Well, it's funny, kind of bringing up someone like Jelly Roll. I was actually supposed to get him at the time, him and Action Bronson, when they were on Louder Than Life a few years ago, right before the festival got canceled last minute for the grounds being unstable. And then the pandemic came and then pushed it back. But it was funny because like those were some of the two people I was like, I want those two. And I know a lot of people, when the announcement got lined up, and I knew some other people in media were going to go, they're like, oh, who are you trying to get? I was like, I actually already got Jelly Roll and Action Bronson. They're like, I have no idea who those people are. And I was like, it's because they're hip hop. Well, hip hop leaning.
Yeah.
And I was mainly Action Bronson, but in Jelly Roll too at the time. And I was like, but those are going to be people you're going to see because they're starting to kind of branch out into this world a little bit more.
Yeah.
And it's one of those, I think potentially Jelly Roll has gotten a little bit too big for me now to where I don't think I can get him. But it was one of those where it's interesting to see, especially behind the scenes, like, it doesn't surprise me that you would have like teched or worked with someone like that, or someone else in the world of like, rock, metal, whatever, would be in that, because typically that's where you find all those people. And to me, it's so funny to see people who keep the genres so separated. And it's like, there's so much more aligned with each other than you think. And it was really interesting actually going to Nashville and kind of being reminded of how, like, you might have someone who's playing country stuff, but it's like, nah, I think like this is a studio musician. They probably play so much different shit that you just, it's so weird to think about how close-minded people are when it comes to music, and thinking like, this is all this is, this world exists here. And it's like, they blur so much.
Oh yeah. And I love that blur, honestly. I mean, look at Jack Fowler right now playing with Jelly Roll, and he's been for a long time, but also, Sleeping, and definitely different genres. Granted, Jelly is like now the top on like, I think the rock charts #1, which I wouldn't have guessed, but it has kind of country and R&B. I don't even know, but yeah.
Well, I think like that's sort of like the interesting thing. Like, the So What Festival's about to happen in, I think, like 10 days or something like that. And you look at something like that, and talking with like Chris from Ghost Inside, and I was like, what I'm excited about, because a lot of people again are so upset that there's like, well, why is there so much hip hop on this? Like, who cares? You should have gotten so and so. And to me, I'm like, the genres are crossing over. Like, you look at someone like a Juice WRLD or like Trippie Redd or some of these other people in the underground kind of hip hop scene. They're starting to kind of become what was sort of like emo kind of stuff, like an Owl City type thing, or things like that, where it's kind of electronic. It's sort of bringing indie rock, post rock, whatever into it. and you're starting to see more metal bands and stuff kind of bringing in like 808 drops and, you know, things like that are kind of at the time more hip hop centric. And I go, but what I'm interested to see is what collaborations will potentially stem from that festival of someone going, I'm a fan of you. And then that person going like, I didn't think you liked us, and vice versa. I'm a fan of yours. Well, fuck it. Let's do something together. Yeah. That's what I'm interested to see what happens, because I think we are at a point where people are now willing to just be like, I'm into this, and this is what I like. These are the genres I like. And I don't care like that I have to be stuck in a metal band or that's all you think I can listen to. And the collaborative part is what I'm most interested to see what happens from here.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, that's a good point. Definitely South by Southwest has such a diverse group or genre, like different genres. Yeah, I'd love to see some. Yeah, that's cool.
What, you know, without sounding kind of naive about it, but like, are you still actively making music yourself or playing at all?
I'm playing. I play in my office, and I do. Not really, honestly. I probably should, but I still, do tech things. From Sleeping sent me all his pedals in a box, and I built him like a pedal board, and I played that for a while. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's just a hobby.
It's interesting to hear you say it like that, because I feel like there would be, even if it's one of those where you're just creating stuff for yourself and it never sees the light of day or whatever, then I'm kind of surprised to hear that you're at least not, writing something or experimenting with different ideas just to satiate that side.
I mean, I do a little bit, probably more than I want to admit, I guess. But yeah, I have like zero. I have a -10, -20 desire to like put anything out or anything like that. So there's not that fuel that drives that as much anymore. I don't know. I think I just see like still the market is very saturated with, metal or just like all types of music. And I don't know if that just like put me down. They're so saturated, every single market. Like, I don't really feel like competing, and, maybe it's my non-competitive nature, but I just, I don't know.
That's interesting. I mean, as I'm literally sitting here with, a ton of guitars, my guitar, like don't fall, and you fell. My like gear that I will never ever play in front of probably anybody, and just buying pedals recently because I was like, well, I committed to a head now, so I need to have actual pedals instead of not plugins, but like those combo amps and shit. And so it's one of those where, like, as I'm kind of going through all this, and it's like sometimes I look at it all and I'm like, why do I need or have like 6 guitars? Why do I want to keep buying these pedals? I'm never gonna do anything. And it's one of those though, like, I enjoy playing. Like, I got a new pedal, and it's kind of really inspired me to keep like try to write stuff, because my problem was not a lack of competitiveness or anything. It was more of, I listen to so much that when I write something, I go, oh, this just sounds like this. And then I'm like, well, there's no point in continuing that riff, because like I already know that if I say that,
oh my gosh,
100 other people are going to notice it. So not even going to bother. But, I'll learn other people's stuff and find enjoyment in just playing. And for that, like, I enjoy that part of it. But it's one of those that I'm surprised. I'm usually surprised when people are just like, I don't have the desire to even want to do that. And that's interesting to me to hear you say that.
I mean, I have like 20 guitars, and I mean, several tons of pedals, and I just keep buying those things. Like, I keep buying them, and my wife's like, what are you planning on doing? I'm like, I don't know. I have an addiction. I need more guitars. I don't even play. I probably have 20-some thousand worth of guitars, and I just pick up the same one every single time, including the ones that I played when I was on tour. I still have those, and I don't know.
It is it is a bit of an investment, but I think at times, like, because I have my first guitar that I got, and it's nothing special at all, but it's like, and it's been kind of beat to shit, but it's one of those where I think at times where I'm like, I should get rid of this. It literally has no value. Like there's nothing of why I should keep this. I'm probably never gonna play it because I know it sounds like crap compared to like what I have. But then it's like there's this weird sentimental attachment where you're like, but it has all these memories associated with it, so it's the sentimental value of whatever, and it's the thing the lie you tell yourself so you can hold on to something.
It's a problem. It's a problem. I do have some guitars that I will never sell, which is most of them. And then I have like 2 that I'm like, oh, I'll get rid of those someday.
It's funny. My dad, so one of the guitars I have, my dad gave me his Epiphone, but his Gibson Joe Perry signature guitar from a while ago because he's like, I just don't play it. So I have it, and I don't play it very often either because like I was like, pickup wise, it's not really what I like. Although I did kind of figure out that it really can play some good like Alice, like it's got that good Alice in Chains kind of tone to it. So for stuff like that, it's a little bit better. But it was one of those things like he bought all these guitars after he quit smoking cigarettes and like bought all this gear. And then he's like, I'm thinking about selling this. I'm thinking about selling that. I was like, don't sell them. And I was like, if you're going to sell them, just literally give them to me. I will probably play them. And I was like, and then if you want them back, I'll just give them back to you. But like, don't sell it. I was like, as someone who has sold some of my guitars, in retrospect, I'm always like, I should have just held on to it. Like for what little bit of money I got at the time, it's definitely not worth it. And I wish I had it now. Or in some instances, you just end up rebuying it.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that's what I did with one of the guitars that I played on tour. I had sold it, and then I tracked down, this is like 2 years ago, I tracked down the buyer, and he had sold it to somebody else. So I got a hold of that dude, and I bought it at a premium price. But yeah, there's some guitars that I wish I would have never sold that I did. I'm like, I still look on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. I'm like, maybe they'll put them back up, but they don't.
What are they?
At least it's a Carvin carved top, like their California carved top. That was like 2007. And then it was a Squire Strat. Sounds basic, but it was actually a USA-made Squire Strat. They only made for 1 or 2 years in early 90s. That one's kind of difficult to find, the exact model that I had.
Yeah, that's so growing. I mean, this is kind of more of a local reference, but my parents live in Kalamazoo, and so my dad has 2 Explorers. One was, I think it's a 68 or 69. It was one of the last years literally Gibson was in Kalamazoo. Oh, so he had one of those that was a Kalamazoo Gibson, and he's kind of like, and that was one he was like, for nostalgic reasons, I'm keeping it. But then he was talking about getting rid of the one when they brought back the Explorers back in like 2002 or 2003.
Okay.
And he's been talking about getting rid of that. I'm like, don't. As someone who like now has gotten into my own set of guitars and things like that, I go, those are the kind of guitars when they only made them for like a year, that it's like those are going to be worth so much money. And it's like the fact you don't ever play it either. It's like, that's why it's like I have such a hard time being like, just sell it, get rid of it, because it's like I don't play it, so someone else will. And it's like, yeah, but like the collector in me is like, no, keep it forever.
Yeah, that's what I wish I would have done with those guitars, but I didn't.
What was your first guitar?
It was that Squire Strat. That's partly why I really want that. I actually sold it to my friend, and he sanded it down, spray painted it. Just we were young. It was probably when I was in high school. Actually, it was when I was in high school. So he still has it. It was also his first. He didn't want to sell it back to me, and also he's ruined it. So to buy something similar would probably be, buy something similar. If I were to find it, would probably be around $1,000 for a Squire. So
it's so weird to say that.
I know.
It's so weird. Like it's so funny because sometimes like some people are so into gear, and like, like I know I have said this, and the person has heard me say it when talking to I think it was actually Chris from Ghost Inside, because all the pedals I recently bought were all Behringer, because like I had bought some Behringer stuff, and it's surprisingly cost efficient and really good. Like most of the stuff I bought, it's like really good. And I didn't know that there was this like negative stigma attached to the company, because everyone's like, they steal the circuits or whatever. And I was like, does someone own a patent on like circuitry? Like at the end of the day, like, it's weird, because like I said, I wasn't really involved in the gear side of things until very recently. But it's so funny that it's just like I guess more so the metal community, where it's like, even in the gear side of things, there's these gatekeepers that were like, what they're doing in selling quality pedals for so cheap, and they sound like, some of these older, more boutique kind of pedals, they're ruining the industry. And you're like, because they make up something affordable so everyone can have it and actually create, like, why is that a bad thing? But it's so interesting to see the negativity around it.
Historically, there's always that. I mean, even I bet you the things that the equipment that they use, they probably I mean, I don't know. The Ghost Inside probably uses Kempers or some type of, quad cortex or whatever. All of those sounds on there, Kemper doesn't really have many sounds that's like, oh, this is Kemper, or this is the quad cortex. It's all modeled after a Diesel or a vintage Marshall or the 6505. Like everybody, like there's like roots, and everybody has copied that 100 million times. Like, and for Behringer, the other brands, like certain people are going to buy the Behringer pedals, and that's the market that Behringer has captured. It's like for people who's like, I'm not on the road. I don't have to worry about durability. I don't have to it doesn't have to be the best pedal in the world. Like I'm playing in my room, and like, why would I buy a $500 pedal? Like I'm never going to buy that. So they were never Behringer didn't take away anybody, like in my opinion.
Well, I think it's more for me, because like I said, like a lot of, so like when I was looking at getting ahead, because what started it all, and it's almost like the house projects actually in my house, we've been living here for 12 years, but we just bought it like a couple of months, or like 2 months ago. And what's interesting is like the paint, like this is the only room that still is the original paint that was in the room when I first moved in. But like I've repainted the rest of the house, I think 2 times over at this point. And the last time I did it, we kind of went sort of dark, but a really light accent wall. But then it's like we tore up the carpet, so that made it lighter. Then we got other things, and like the one thing kind of informs the next thing, but it makes you end up spending so much more money, because you're like, all right, well, we tore up the carpet, now it's lighter. Okay, so like now instead of having the dark colored furniture, like let's go lighter. Let's buy these accent things. Let's buy a new table. Let's buy a new chair. Let's buy a new couch. Like you start doing all these things, and you're like, and my wife was even making the comment. She goes, I bought a brand new coffee table for us, and it's white or marble. And she goes, and then that ended up being a $300 entertainment center that ended up being, $200 worth of new rugs that ended up being, and you just start pointing at all the things that we then started building around, just to start matching, natural colors and stuff like that, and complementary colors. And it's the same thing that I realized with my guitar stuff, where it was like a friend of mine hit me up, and he was like, hey, Vincent from the Acacia Strain selling his ESP. And I know you like them. Were you interested in buying it? And I was like, since I had just put my dog down, and I know that bills like stack up real quickly, and I have some extra money, 100%, I'll buy it. And then I was like, hey, can you put some Fishmans in it? Because I wanted it to be different than all my other ESPs with the EMGs in it. And then so he was like, I have an extra set of Fishmans, but I only have one set, and I actually just bought a new guitar. So then I tried hitting up Ken, and I was like, hey, like, can you somehow maybe hook it up and send a set over to like this area of Massachusetts? And he's like, oh, we're kind of in back order, So then finally I ended up buying the set from my friend. He had his tech put them in, and then the guitar was sent to me. And then, but that started a whole thing of like my buddy going, well, if you're putting Fishmans in, you have to get a head, because you're like an actual head for your stuff, because you're not going to be able to hear the difference tonality wise of it running through the like Line 6 pre like Kemper kind of thing, where it's just got all these built-in tones and shit into it. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. So then started this long thing of like, well, what do I want out of a head? What kind of a tone do I want? And then it was like, hey, check out these 5153s that they just, you know, at the time had just put out. And I was like, all right, like, you know, I know everyone's usually 5150s is usually really good. Everyone loves those 6505 or 6505s. And like, so I was like, all right, like that'll run good with my Mesa cab. Like, okay. And then like, it's just funny that it literally started with, hey, I want these pickups. Well, if you get those pickups, you got to get a different head. Okay.
Oh my God.
And then here's $1,200 there, you know, $600 for this guitar. I think the pickups were like $200. And it's like, you just start going through, and now all of a sudden it's like, you know, $400 worth of things down there. And you're like, why? Why did I do this?
Yep. I live that life every day.
Do you actually still have like your actual cabs, or did you switch over to more of the profilers and such?
I actually, I had a Morgan head and cabinet with a big road case, and I kept that. That's one of the things that I was like selling still, but I sold it maybe 3 years ago, and it was loud, and I don't like loud things. It was loud, and it was way overkill. Like, you know, I had this big road case. It was super nice. And I'm like, man, I can get a nice combo. And I don't play a lot of metal. It's more rock most of the time. And so I actually sold it and built, I also build amps. I built a, like a Fender 5E3, like a Tweed Deluxe clone and a clone with the money that I got from that. So I have those two amps now instead of that.
How did you get into like making cabs and stuff, and how'd you get into that?
I mean, I've just always, just from being a tech, like I've always tried to fix things that were broken. You know, a lot of the times you're out on tour and you have like, let's say you have a delay pedal or a tuner or something that goes bad, and you just throw it in a drawer and you buy a new one.
Yeah.
You know, I have time to fix something like that unless it's something simple. So we'd go to Guitar Center, grab a new one, and that one was just sitting there. So eventually I was like, oh, I'm going to take these home and like look at them. And I think, and then I bought like a couple of kits, like pedal kits, and built those, and I can solder, and I read some electronics books and watched some YouTube videos, and I love that. I love electronics and learning about them. So I would say it's like a major passion of mine.
Is that something potentially that you would be interested in, maybe starting like a boutique, you know, business of yourself, kind of dipping into a different side of the music industry that maybe would be more actually for you?
Again, like it's just so saturated. There's so many pedal companies. Like I would have to come up with something extremely unique. Like I wouldn't want to, like I wouldn't want to like, oh hey, here's a, I don't know. It'd have to be something just really unique. But it's not necessarily a desire of mine. I would build something for a friend or something, you know, and not charge them a ton. But outside of that, I don't know.
It's so funny in talking to you. I'm just like, you're the reluctant music person where you're like, yeah, like, you know, I did these things and I'm good enough to be at a professional level. I just don't want to do anything in this industry ever.
It's terrible. It's so funny because people in a band and they're trying to make it and they come talk to me and they're like, oh man, what's it like? And like, you know, we have any advice? I'm like, yeah, I got some advice for you, man. Quit. I'm always so like, I don't quit. I'm like always very real. Like, I'm like, are you ready to give up a lot of stuff? Are you like, and are you ready for it to be temporary? Like very few bands, you know, go longer than 10 years, let alone 15, you know, like you got to think all these things through. And it's such I am such a buzzkill with that stuff, and I kind of hate it, but I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with me.
It's just so interesting because I feel like, you like with what you just said about like how you love kind of tearing things apart and kind of fixing things and exploring like electronics and stuff like that. Like, I mean, in theory, you're kind of like someone who would need a tech. Like, you're like a tech's wet dream. Like, I need someone who wants to do all that and like will get into the weeds of like making my stuff sound as best as it can. Because like right now, I don't have a pedal board, and I actually was gonna like hit up a friend who's made a few and be like, all right, like help me. Like, I at least figured out, thanks to Google, figured out the correct chain that I needed to put everything in. But when like right now I hate chords and everything. Like, I would like want it to be just so nice and tight and like can't see any of my chords and all that.
I love doing that.
But see, like I'm at the point where I'm like, I don't know how to like I'm kind of frugal because I'm like, do I really need a pedal board? But like, as I'm like kind of having to space the crap out so I can like hit it. Like, I go from either being like space it out so my feet can kind of don't hit anything else on accident. But then I'm also like, well, I want them nice and tight and compact, so I'm not having to like stretch my like power stance when I'm playing, hit everything. But it's one of those, like, I'm kind of interested to see how making the pedal board is going to be, but then I'm probably also going to do the thing I know I'll do where I'll be like, oh, I should have done this, or this is what I like, or I'll get another pedal because I'll be like, oh, I have everything I need, and then I'll be like, oh, I added another one, and now I need a bigger pedal board, or I need another one, or whatever. And to me, though, it's like, I hear you like, I love doing this, and it's like, well, you should do that. No. Like, it to me, like, it's just so, it's so interesting that you have the skills, I'll say, the skill set to, to be able to play an instrument proficiently enough to be in a professional band, that you have the want and desire to learn the ins and outs of your instrument and the different components on how to make the sounds and so forth, and that you want to do that and you enjoy it. But then it's like, well, is that something you did? No. And I just find that really interesting, that it's like you have the capability and the understanding to, I think, be very successful in that, but you choose not to.
I don't know why. I mean, it could be profitable, I guess, in some ways. I mean, I think it just comes down to like my priorities. I've got 2 kids. I've got several rentals properties, and I have pretty much I do have a full-time job, and so like my time is very limited. So I think I would have to give up something in order to make that work. And at this point, I work at it. Once I put my kids to bed, I'll work on it, and I think I have to move stuff around, and unless it's like with Jack, with that pedal board that I built him, like I had to prioritize that, and I probably spent 8 hours on it or something like that. And it was very satisfying, and I loved doing it, but I wouldn't want to have like queued up, like it's just, I wouldn't like with that. Like he gave me like these several really nice pedals in return for me to do this. And like, that was awesome. I loved it. And I was like, this pro bono. Like, I'm not even looking for any cash or anything like that, but he's very generous. So
it's
I'll do it for you too.
Yeah. I when it comes to a lot of this stuff, I probably need all the help I can get. 'Cause a lot of times I'm just like, actually, it's funny. I've been trying to figure out, and it's just my lack of knowledge, but it's like, I have, this is where I'll probably need to start, and I don't even want to go down this rabbit hole. But this, like, I'm getting some noise on my distorted channel, but like, even with my noise gate, like, it doesn't stop it. But like, when you go to any of the other channels, the dirty and the clean, it's not there. It's just like kind of that ominous hum, like, of just being whatever. And I'm like, I don't know if it's something in the head. I don't know if it's something, the connection to the guitar, even though the input's in there and it's not loose. So it's like, I don't know where this hum is coming from, and it's really, really annoying. And it's one of those where I'm like, I could probably spend so much time, because I'm sure if I go to the internet and I try to figure out what's causing it, someone's like, what you need is a rack-mounted noise suppressor that's like $1,200, and then you need to like do this, this, and this. And I'm like, I don't need any more gear.
Yeah,
to just literally play in this room when my wife's not home.
All that's just process of elimination. Start from just plugging your guitar directly into the amp,
and it's still the noise is there. So that's I at least know it's something between the guitar and the head at least, or maybe even the cab. But it's one of those that like it's so funny because it's like there are some people that are so into all of that stuff, and like a lot of times like like with one of the pedals I just got was a chorus, like an ultra chorus pedal, and I've fallen in love with this thing. Like it's made me like be like, yes, like this and the delay and the reverb, I really enjoy it. I don't even care about distortion anymore. I just want to play around with this and like kind of like the little envelope wah filter thing I kind of got. And it's one of those where like I get so excited about it, but it's like once I kind of got the tone I want out of it, I don't even mess with it anymore. And like some people, it's funny to me where I'm like, there will be someone who's like, oh, what you need to do now is then set this setting so it sounds like this, or buy another pedal so then you can do this with it. And you're like, that's like, no, I don't need two of the same pedals so I can have alternating settings so I can do like again, because it's like
you need four of the
just
same.
playing in this room. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, it's like I did kind of I wasn't really stoked with the signal boost I got, and then I ended up getting an overdrive pedal. But then I found on a clean channel when you stack them together, it's got a nice, like almost like a big muff kind of sound to it the way I've got it set up. And I was like, that was a happy accident, but
yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's real fun. And it's so funny because people are like, oh, you should post videos of you playing. And I was like, nope.
I would say the same thing. Like,
Well, I don't know. Like I was talking with Fabio or Fabian or Fabio. I don't remember because I was told his name was Fabian. And then on everything I've seen from the guitar player from Trollfest, it's Fabio. And we were talking kind of about gear or whatever, but then we got to talking about like YouTube musicians and like all the people you see on social media and so forth. And I go, like I see these people and, especially like drummers and guitar players and even bassists and stuff like that. And you see these players who are just so phenomenally good. Yeah. And, they're doing these covers and, some of the drummers, especially where they got like, these LED light rigs behind them and all these great cameras and it's in like 4K and it sounds great. Yeah. But then you're like, and the thing I keep coming back to is, okay, like you played this song and you played it really proficiently, but can you write something that sounds like that? Like, do you have the ability to write something that is equally as like, wow, that's impressive, or that's really good. And the way you're able to kind of do your fills to this part or whatever, do you possess the musical ability to write something on par with what you are showing that you're capable of playing? And it's made me start wondering, has musicianship gotten to a point where it's about being able to show off your ability, but you don't possess any ability to write music that's of the same capabilities, same emotive presences or whatever? But and that's kind of an interesting thought to me is, do people play these instruments because they're really passionate about it and want to write music that inspires other people? Or is it becoming just a thing of like, I can do this, here's my likes, and it's now how I make money?
Yeah. I think there's definitely probably two sides of the coin on that, because people, I think they're playing what people want to hear, which is covers most of the time. Like, I mean, really. And the other side is they probably something that's original. It's probably going to get less likes, less views, less reach, so they probably need a creative outlet. They'll probably get burnt out if they just keep doing that, if that is the only thing that they do.
It just makes me wonder what it's going to end up doing for the next era. Like, because a lot of podcasts talk about, who are the next bands that are going to take over, like, so you see these festivals and everyone's like, oh, I'm tired of seeing, Iron Maiden headlining these festivals. I'm tired of seeing, the same people, the same bands. And it's like, okay, like who are the next headliners? Who are the next bands that are going to come up? And I'm kind of starting to kind of go a slightly different route where I'm like, who are the next bands that are going to come up? Because it doesn't seem like the industry is conducive, as you've said several times. It's so oversaturated. So it's like, okay, who are the young bands that are going to get the opportunities to come up and get those, tour slots potentially to start building their name? And it's kind of sad because like one of the few examples I can think of really that has that has kind of ascended that ladder seemingly or very organically was Knocked Loose. Like I've seen that band so many times with so many bands, you know, opening for Every Time I Die, opening for the Acacia Strain, opening for all these bands, opening for Terror, and then getting to a level where once they kind of started getting their own fan base, returning the favor, taking out Acacia Strain, taking out, you know, Terror, to where now it's like you're seeing them play, like headlining, you know, the Stash here in Grand Rapids, headlining, you know, and selling out Elevation, and then just literally a couple of weeks ago, selling out or the main room of the Intersection with a really good package tour. But they kind of do what I feel like a lot of their contemporaries did for them, where it's like, you're the band that we believe in, so we're going to take out old bands that took us out, but we're also going to bring out bands that we love that are maybe you don't know, and they're kind of on the come up as well. To now seeing, like, literally they just, you know, got announced on opening and being direct support for Bring Me, and it's like that's such a huge look. And I can't think of any band in the heavy space that is kind of organically traversed and become that band to where it's like, okay, like that's kind of the template you follow: be good people, make good music, and just kind of, you know, don't be shitty.
I feel like they're pretty unique.
Yeah. But I can't think of, like, I don't know of any other bands really that I feel like have the ability to do that. And I don't know if it's because the scene or the fan base of music in general is so fickle that no one really wants to invest time into people and grow with a product, grow with a band, or if it's the industry just kind of being like, we're not gonna back bands because if it's not if it's not a tired and true band, we're not going to back them and invest in them. So I feel like we're a couple years away from either it just kind of resetting essentially, because there's nothing that's coming up and everything's falling down after the, you know, bands break up. Like, I mean, look at Every Time I Die.
Yeah.
I look now at that band and it's so weird because I'm like, I invested 20 some odd years into this band. And like now they're done. And it wasn't like hey, we're old or a member died or whatever. I mean, it was just a shit show of a catastrophe of how they ended. And it's one of those where you're like, if that is what a band that from all accounts from the outside looked impenetrable and was one of those bands that you looked at of like, these are guys who do it for the love of the music. They love touring. They don't overspend on buses and all the things that financially cripple bands down the road.
Yeah.
And to go out the way they did, where it's just like, if it happened to them, how does anyone stand a chance of having a career? As like you were saying, how does anyone stand a chance of making it 5, 10, 15, 20 years? There's no way.
Yeah. Goodness. Difficult. Super difficult. But it happens, just rare, you know.
If you were to start a new project, what would it sound like? Because you were saying like you don't really play metal, you're more of a rock player. Yeah. Would that be something more you would end up kind of going toward, or would you be more even kind of like a indie rock kind of thing?
It would be probably like something like Royal Blood. I don't know if you're familiar with them. Royal Blood or like above 1979. Like I really like those bands a lot. Third Eye Blind. I love Third Eye Blind.
Great band.
Yeah. I don't know, just rock. Probably what it would sound like.
I feel like you got songs on a hard drive just sitting there.
I mean, I guess I do.
I'm gonna scour the internet. I'm gonna find a secret SoundCloud of your music somewhere that you shared with somebody.
Oh my gosh. There is I think the last iTunes from me is a band called For All We Know, and actually pretty much all the members in Sleeping with Sirens were in it, including Kellen. So it's like, oh, and Nick from Attack, their old screamer. I mean, he was in it. iTunes. It's pretty comical. It's metal, or like, yeah, kind of metal.
So I kind of get the vibe that you're not really, and maybe not were really into metal much. Was that something that you actually were into? Like, are you like a lot of us where you're like, oh, I got into metal through like Metallica, or I heard, a lot of the older bands, were you really into metal at some point, or was it just kind of something you fell
Yeah.
into?
I was into metal. Like the first heavy band that I heard was Thrice on like the Atticus compilation CD, and I was like, "What is this? It's so good!" And that like got me into a lot of other bands that were similar. But I would say, yeah, anything after like 2009, I didn't like. Like I didn't like Attack Attack, or I guess that was earlier than that. But I just didn't get into. Uh, yeah, like A Day to Remember or any of those kind of bands. I stuck with more rock, I think, at that point, not like Stained or Crossfade or something like that. But
Man,
um,
that band had so many hits and then just dropped off the face of the earth.
no,
Like, I don't know what happened to that band, but like, and the funny thing is, you still throw on like those three singles, like Colors, whatever the other singles were, and like everyone still gets pumped, and you're like,
Yeah,
this is a solid. I mean, for what it is, it's a solid band. Although now when I listen to it, I'm like, the
it is.
production on
It
this
is.
is so terrible. Like, it's like the guitars during the guitars during the verses on the clean channels are significantly louder than even the distorted tone, and it's almost like it just gets pushed way back into the mix, and you're like, why? Why was that the choice you made?
Yeah,
That's the kind of
yeah.
nerd I am when
I don't
I
know.
listen to things.
No, same. I mean, that's what I started doing. I still mix, but yeah, recording engineer. So I hear all that stuff. I'm like, ugh. The thing that bothers me the most is that Oasis song. That's like today's gonna be the day.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, if you listen to that, listen to the mix on that. It's the worst thing you've ever heard. It's like you hear the acoustic and you're like, oh, I'm gonna turn this up. And then you have it up at a good volume, and then the vocals come in and just blows out your speakers. And it's like, it's two things, acoustic and vocal. Why didn't you just vocal or turn up the acoustic? Like, what? This is a extremely popular song.
What's funny is I forget the artist, but someone was, I think it was like a podcast or an interview, I'd been listening to, and someone was like, it's funny because like with acoustic guitars, when it comes to production and mixing, you can either go kind of really bright to where it almost sounds kind of like you're running an electric guitar through an acoustic simulator and it sounds fake, or you get like what I kind of refer to as more of like the actual kind of like room sounding acoustic, where it's like and I'm not very, I mean, you'll probably know more of this, but like almost like those dynamic mics, I think is what they are, like the little thin ones that you put in front of like the opening of the guitar, and
condenser,
and it sounds more like, I think when you think of an acoustic like that, it sounds like that. And so someone was like, oh, there was this song and it was an acoustic guitar and it was like a pop song, but the way that the person had mixed and produced the acoustic tone, he's like, it sounds sad and like depressing, and that's not what you want. You kind of you totally changed the dynamic of this song. It's supposed to be upbeat and happy, so then they kind of compressed the shit out of it and made it sound, like I said, like, fake acoustic guitar with a real guitar. And it was so funny to hear someone talk about how just even how you approach the production side of just recording a guitar can completely change the dynamic of how the song actually sounds.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Oh my gosh. Especially with acoustic.
Is that, again, I just come back to like, if you're into that, why don't you do more of it? But I already know the answer is going to be because I'm just not, because it's so oversaturated. There's no point.
It's such a, that's funny. I recorded when I was with Sleeping, I recorded his vocals for a couple of the songs. I did some editing. I didn't get any credits, of course. And I don't know. I've just been doing it for a really long time, but I don't know.
You have like the worst business acumen in the music industry.
Oh my God.
I recorded and edited vocals, but I didn't get my pub. Yeah. It's so funny.
Yeah. I mean, it was just, I don't know. I do a lot of video production now. That's like my main thing. And I mean, I really enjoy it, and it's lucrative, which unlike anything in the music industry. And so those two things, not that it's all about money, but I do have a family that I got to support. But, with it being lucrative and I am passionate about it, I tend to put all my weight into that.
It's funny because I feel like, and this is such a weird way to say this, but I feel like from what little bit of looking online to kind of just see like, a little bit about you that I can kind of get from pictures or whatever you post, it seems like you're not really much for posting things. So it's interesting to hear that you kind of are interested in a more visual medium and enjoy it, considering you yourself don't really do something in a visual medium.
I know. I'm like, dang, I haven't posted in a year. And I have tons of photos, tons of photos on my phone. Like I went to Nashville and New Orleans, the Jelly tour, and I didn't post one photo. I'm like, oh, I'll post it. Like, oh, I'll post this. And then I just don't. I don't know. Maybe it's like a pressure in the back of my mind that I'm like, oh, I got to make, because I'm creative, like visually creative. I'm like, oh, I got to make sure the picture's perfect. It's edited well, and I don't know. And every time I post, I lose followers too. So I'm like, if I post, I'm going to lose 20 followers. Like, do I want to lose 20 followers? Well, I don't even care.
It's
anyway. So
it's so funny as you're saying,
because when I post, people are like, "Oh, he's not in." Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, it's so funny because like I'm having kind of the same. I won't say it's a conundrum, but like it's so when I like a couple like 4 years ago, actually, I guess I take back. It's so funny too when I find that when talking to people, everyone forgets that when they say like 2 years ago, you realize like, no, that's not accurate because like literally the pandemic was 2 years. So it's almost like when we talk about time, we kind of forget that there literally has been 2 years that existed, but we didn't do anything. So it just doesn't seem like that's a part of your chronological timeline anymore. Yeah. So I guess actually to back it up a little bit more, probably about 4 years ago, the podcast was pulling in almost 10,000 downloads a month. And I'm at a point where the numbers are so bad now that it like laughably bad that it's one of those where I'm like, something's got to change, but I don't know what it is because I literally don't know why people like, where did the other like 8,500, 9,000 people go? And like, I don't have an explanation. Cause like, I'm like, the show is better. It sounds better than it used to back then. And I think like the quality of guests are better. And I'm like, but there's no feedback that I get. So I literally have no understanding of what's going on. And so like, as of yesterday, I finally started reaching out and just threw it out there to be like, who wants to be my social media person? Cause like, clearly I'm not doing something right. And I'll take the ownership of like, it must be me because it's only me. But even when talking to people, they're like, oh, well, you should do this. And I'm like, I did. And then like, I had one person look through my socials. And they're like, well, you tag things. And I'm like, I don't think hashtags work at all. Like I go, and then someone's like, well, you got to use them for this. And I go, literally tell me at any point when hashtags have been a thing that you've ever clicked on one and then started perusing through or started following that hashtag. I go, never have I done that. And then it's like, oh, you should try. Oh, well, I did try that. Here, look at that. And they're like, oh, well, how'd that do? Didn't do anything. And it's like, you have all these people who tell you, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. And it's like, but why? Like, it doesn't seem to work. And I keep coming back to this thing of like, I would like this to be successful. I would like this to go back to where it was or get beyond that because I believe in it. Mm-hmm. But when I talk to people and they're like, well, you should try this. I did. You should try this. I did. And it's like, I don't have the capacity anymore to care. If I really am being honest, I love doing this. But I have the rest of it of like putting it out and promoting it and all that. I just don't care anymore. I've hit that wall where I'm like, I don't care. The numbers reflect that like no one seemingly cares. So who cares? Like I'll match that same energy. Like I was telling someone yesterday, I was like, I'm about to just shake it up entirely and literally no intro, no outro, no nothing. Just throw the episodes out as soon as I get them done. And I will literally throw everything at you that I got when I get it, and just stack the numbers, because it's like, okay, like at that point, if I put out 10 episodes in a week and we'll say 100 people or 150 people are subscribed, that counts, and that'll get my numbers up real fast.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But it's like, I'm not, but part of me comes back to, it's like, would anyone care at that point? Or would people be like, oh, fuck this dude, like that's too much stuff. Lose 20, lose 20, lose 20. And it's so weird that I'm like, almost like you, where I'm like, I love this and I have a passion and a desire for this, but the business side of the thing is like what's starting to like drive me nuts about it, where I'm like, I literally do not know what to do to make this be where it was, or to capture people who I know would be into this. But it's like, as another person I were talking last night, it's like, how do you get people to realize what you're doing is of more value than something they have perceived value in, and you know that they would enjoy more? How do you get that person? How do you tell them that? And I go, I have no idea. And I don't know if it's my age and like just lack of not wanting to be on social media anymore, because it honestly is a cesspool half the time. So actually that was something I was going to bring up anyways. Like, I kind of am envious of you that you don't seem to live a life, or have to live a life, of having to be online, because I think if you were in a band, you'd have to plug the new single, the new video, the new tour, and you'd have to be more active on it. There it is. And that's how I am, like almost every single week, where I'm like, I don't want to post on everything. I don't like, that's literally 25, 30 minutes a day when I have to do it, when I post an episode of just sitting online, posting everywhere. And it's annoying. I don't like it.
Yeah. It does sound terrible.
I mean, do you,
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've seen on some of your stuff you post when I think your friend that does the drums, I assume that you filmed and edited that stuff. Is that why you post that?
I just did that because he's a close friend of mine, but I didn't do anything on that.
Okay. I had wondered if that was sort of like a low-key way of being like, hey, I support my friend, and I also shot and edited this too, so if you're interested in that, this is what I do.
Nope. Just he's a close friend of mine, and he's trying to put stuff out there, and I was, I like to support in that way, so I did that. But it's like, I think Vibe Studios in Grand Rapids. I don't know.
Okay.
They do commercial stuff and music stuff, but
it's really interesting to see some of that sort of popping up. Like, I had an idea. There's a studio literally right down the street from my house, and I literally never see anyone there. But it's one of those, like, I thought about going before I invested in more of my own gear. But I'd almost thought about being like, there's enough podcast people I know here that I almost wanted to be like, hey, is there like a day that we could, it's like, we pump your studio, you can put all your branding behind us or whatever, but you can make our show sound better. And it would sort of be like a literal advertisement for what services you offer and that you exist, but you would allow us to kind of create something, and we can kind of start a little bit of like a collective of local, podcast people or creatives that are in the audio space. And I thought about doing it, and then I was just like, why? Like, they're probably just gonna be like, yeah, we'll do it, but it'll be blank amount of money. And I think that's the weird part when you start getting into some of these things, is you're like, well, I don't have any, but you should let me use your stuff and do stuff for a trade-off of goods. But a lot of people don't work on a barter system. But I was reminded of that.
I mean, it's an advertising, It's not even
But again,
I guess it is.
I feel like the barter system needs to come back.
I
have nothing of value to give anybody, but I. So I say that as someone who would be like, "What do you have?" Nothing, but I'll gladly barter with you.
Dude, I always do that. Like, I just got a new roof on my house, and I was like, "Yo, I have a drone, and I am a professional videographer, and I do commercials and stuff. Like, let me film a marketing video for you guys." They didn't do it, but I mean, they definitely need the help, but they just don't see that they need the help. but everything that I get done or anything, I'm always like, because everybody needs videography. Everybody wants more marketing materials, but they just don't have some of that.
I mean, is that something you went to school for at all, like marketing and all that, or are you just more of a mind for it?
I just grew up in it. My dad was like a marketing advertising agent, and he started a couple businesses, and I just learned. I'd say, yeah, marketing is like through creative content, I think is my bread and butter.
Yeah, my wife always says that I'm good at marketing, but then when I go, like, so her company that she works for is called Grand River Aseptic Manufacturing. They're here in GR. And they're a sterile injectable company. And for a little while, when I worked for the company, we were making the Johnson and Johnson vaccine. And at one point, I was, because like, if you work in the more of the business, like, big box kind of like big companies, they're all about weird acronyms. And so at one point around
they are.
around Christmas, I made the comment. I was like, "Oh, we're a Grammarly." And then I think she said something about it or said it or posted it in an email or something. And the next thing I know, like it became a thing that caught on. And she was like, "Yeah, that's marketing." And I was like, "Yeah, but I was doing it to be funny." I was like, I was like, it's one of those where I was like, oh, our CFO, like he's so into like these buzzwords and so forth. Like, I'm surprised he hasn't come up with this, or, now that we've expanded and there's, multiple campuses as they call them, but like, multiple buildings, that it's like, oh, you can call it a Grampus. Like, I'm just like stupid things like that.
Grampus.
And like, so it was like these dumb things, but it's like, there are a lot of things like that where I'm like, oh, this would be a cool idea. Like we could do this. And people are like, yeah, it's a great idea. And I'm like, I have the ideas, but a lot of times I'm just like, but it's like, how do you make money off of that?
Yeah.
Like, here's a word.
Yeah.
Start running with your promotional materials.
Word. But then, you just pay me like $20 and or you can just use it for free and not pay me anything.
It's probably what I mean, as a true starving quote unquote artist, that's probably what really it becomes, is I'll give someone an idea. I mean, like there's been a few ideas that like I've had where like a few ideas I've had where I was like, oh, we could do this. And someone's like, oh, 100%, that would be really great. And then I was like, well, why don't we do that? And they're like, oh, well, because, like at Sam's Club, like one of my things was when running the front end, we had to constantly do credit card promotions. And I hated it. I hate trying to sell people things that I don't think you need. And so, I mean, if you've ever been in, anywhere that's trying to sell you a credit card, as soon as they start talking to you, no, I'm not interested. So I was like, how do you get over that? How do you get over the even just the approach of trying to talk to someone about it? So we had a credit card competition or an event coming up, although it is a competition between the stores. And I made a sign, and it was just like, ask me how I can save you $40 today. And I put them on all the registers, like literally right there at the register on the other side of the thing that people are using. And we, at the time, like the first day, like, cause it was a 3-day event. So on Friday before I left, I think we had it like over 300 and something credit card applications submitted by like 6:00, like when I was leaving. Wow. And to the point where our district manager or our area managers, regional managers literally came to see what we were doing. Cause we were literally leading the entire US in credit card applications for the day. And then when they came and saw it, they were like, that's what you're doing? And I go, yeah. And they go, well, who approved that? And I go, what do you mean approve that? I was like, I just made a sign and put it on the register. Like, why do I need approval for that? Like, you told me to drive engagement and drive results, and I did that. And now you're telling, and then they had me literally take it down because they said it wasn't company approved and it didn't have, the right branding or the right phrasing or whatever. But then the irony was like, after I had left the company, I saw those same signs, not done much differently than I literally did it. And I'm like, so when I did it, I get reprimanded for not following the proper chain of command or whatever, even though I'm getting the results you wanted. And I feel like that would be how marketing would be for me, where I'm like, here's an idea. And they're like, well, you can't do that though. And it's like, okay.
Yeah. They're probably trying to, like, somebody putting up a note that says, hey, buy this or else I will kill you with a gun.
That's actually the NRA's new marketing campaign.
Yeah, I think it
actually,
is.
That's really in distaste. Yeah, that's a really bad distaste for what just actually happened recently. So I apologize. I might cut that out.
Oh, true. Oh, shoot.
Anyway, what better way to start ending the episode than with a really, really offensive thing?
Really, I live for those things.
Yes, it's an interesting time to be alive. That's something I've kind of talked about with some people too. Is being close to 40 and trying to traverse this world of like pronouns and all that kind of stuff, and trying to be respectful of how people want to be and to live their life and as they should, but still at times also growing up in an era where we didn't have the internet, and like I know, at least for me, I was bullied, and I think it kind of gives you a tough skin and kind of makes you overcome maybe some of your own insecurities about things.
Yeah.
But it's like that's not the world we live in now. And even to the point of like I've seen it at concerts actually, where people will be at a rock or metal show on the floor 7-8 rows back from the barricade, and then you'll have people and you might bump into them when the crowd lunges forward and people are like, don't touch me, and you're like, you're at a fucking show, dude, like you're on the floor. Like people are going to touch you.
Avoid that.
I cannot avoid that. Like I'm sorry. And it's kind of made me realize that people try to, and I mean, to a degree, rightfully so. I'm of the mind, if you don't like something, just ignore it. But it has created this world now where I'm interested to see what the children, literally the kids, like, potentially even your kids, I'm interested to see, what their lives are going to be like in 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah,
because they'll have existed when the internet and all of this stuff has always been accessible to them. And what does being able to block someone who has a differing opinion of yours and never having to actually converse with someone that you don't like or don't agree with, what will that make the world like in 15, 20 years? Like, it makes me think of those things. And I don't have kids and I'm never going to have kids, but it's something that I see and I wonder, what is the next, people presumably when I'm 50, 60 and like they're the ones coming into the workplace, they're the ones kind of starting to make the decisions for the world. Like, what is it going to look like at that point?
Yeah, it puzzles me. I don't know, man. It's gonna be nuts. I guess it'll just be the new norm, obviously, but
is that something that you are, I guess, slightly worried about with your own kids, is without kind of getting too into the weeds, but having an online presence or like, when is it acceptable to, I mean, I know your kids are probably way young, but it's like, when is it acceptable to have a cell phone? What does, being allowed to be online look like?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I have thought about that. He's 5 and my daughter's 1. So I mean, theoretically I have a few years, but there are kids, that are 8, 10, but definitely 8 that have kids, or that have kids. That's not true.
Yes.
That have cell phones and social media accounts. I guess we'll see when he's 8 or however old, when he's in. Dude, I don't even know. Yeah, I don't know. I would love him to have a cell phone for emergencies, like that has like one button and it's either me or 911. I think that makes sense. But it's not often where he's alone. When you're 8, you're not alone, like, ever. So I don't know. I feel like I'm going to I feel like I'll be pretty protective, honestly, over that kind of stuff. But I want him to also not be like totally oblivious to like the world, I want him to have real world experiences and be able to relate with people.
Are you finding, because I'm trying to think, at 5, you're probably at least in what, preschool? I don't even know if that's still a thing.
He's in preschool.
Okay.
Ends in like 15 days, but yeah.
Are you seeing, and again, like, this is just lack of knowledge since I don't have a child and I've not really been around children school aged, even though I literally live across the street from an elementary, but are you finding that even how kids are learning is like digital now? Like, where you get a tablet, you do things like with assignments on like tablets and stuff? Is it getting to that point?
Not yet. Not yet. At
Okay.
least we send them to a private school.
Hmm.
So maybe the public schools are, but yeah, I mean, so far it's been all old fashioned.
Hmm. Interesting.
They're technologically advanced. They have computers. Of course, they have computers, but I mean, like, it's a nice school. It's a really nice school. So
Hmm.
I don't think that they're doing it affordability wise. But
It's just one of those, like, as you kind of think about these things, it's like, you know, it would seem like instead of maybe teaching something to, I mean, I don't know, it kind of goes to like, how do you learn? Like, are you more of a, like an audio visual person? Are you more of a, like, get your hands dirty and kind of do it yourself, trial and error? Like, everyone learns differently. So I feel like that to me is where schooling and education would be kind of interesting now, to where it's like, okay, maybe we can figure out, like, I know, like, for an example, I know that when I was in high school, like, it was my junior year, um, I had a biology class, and my teacher knew that I knew this stuff because, like, if I had to do a presentation or whatever, did very well with it. But it's like when it came time to, like, for the written test, like, I just wasn't doing well. And it was one of those where she was like, what's the problem? And I was like, she even asked me questions like that I had gotten wrong on the test, but I knew it. And she was like, you got it right, but you got it wrong here. And I was like, well, because the question was kind of worded a bit weird. And so, like, I wasn't sure if it meant this or this. So I kind of started over explaining and so forth, and trying to showcase that I knew what it was, but I also was covering my base if what I said wasn't right either. And so then it was like, became a thing of like, okay, like, when we do these tests, you're just going to go, and then, after school, come back, and then I'll just give you the test in an audible way. And then, we'll do it that way. And
oh,
then once we
yeah,
did that and kind of figured that out, I did, back to being, an A student and all that kind of stuff in it. But I look back on that and thinking about how that teacher specifically figured out that, like, it wasn't that I didn't know the information, it was just that I wasn't good at presenting it in this medium. So I feel like with having digital
mm,
assets now, potentially that will allow kids to not necessarily have to be stuck, doing something a certain way. Like, I can teach you on a board and I can explain, but then we have these programs that go along and you can kind of follow along. And there's a few different ways that you'll be able to take in the information. And hopefully between them, we'll kind of be able to see, like, oh, do you do better with me explaining something, or do you do better with a program that kind of teaches you the same thing in a different way and has like little quizzes throughout, and then you kind of almost like a
mm,
video game where, like, oh, you
yeah,
didn't pass this, until you pass this you don't go to the next part. But it's not done in a sort of way that makes you feel defeated, that you're dumb or stupid or whatever. It kind of creates a little bit of a competitiveness in you to be like, oh, okay, so I got that wrong, okay, so I'm going to remember that, and then when I go again and maybe they do them out of order or whatever, like a game, and then it allows you to kind
yeah.
of figure things out. But, like, I think of those kind of things, and the potential for kids to learn and to not be defeated in, getting a bad grade, and being able to have tools that will allow them to learn what is the best way to learn. But I also don't know
Yeah.
if they're doing that already, or if you're seeing that as a parent yourself.
I hope that's what they do as he gets older. I mean, yeah, I was terrible in school, and I mean, they teach a very certain way, like they don't get outside of the box most of the time. But I think that the school system in a little bit in that way, and they're recognizing that kids are failing. Certain types of kids are failing um, because it's just not the way that they learn, or yeah.
Do you see, I'll say, at least with your 5-year-old, are you seeing that he has an inclination toward anything creative at this point?
Yeah, I feel like well, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, I mean, it is tough to tell because he's still young, but I mean, he loves drawing and painting, coloring. I think most kids do at that age. And I mean, he's doing good in school like I did when I was young. So I, I bought him a guitar and a piano, and he doesn't really use them. So, which is
This takes after you.
at least there's At least they're there. But then I was like, wait, do I want him to get into music? The answer is yes, I do. But,
I think it's
yeah.
I think that's interesting because, I talk, and have talked with Brian from Shadows Fall. They've been doing some of these, one-off reunion shows, and I know his kids I think they're like 8 or 9-ish or so. And so I've kind of talked about do they understand what dad used to do, and understand that you used to be in a band and that you toured and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, yeah, they kind of understand. And he goes, and I go, or are you taking them to the reunion show? And he goes, yeah, they were at a couple of shows when they first were born, but obviously too young to remember those. So I'm excited for them to see this thing now that they will have, cognitive memories of that down the road. Yeah. And to me, I feel like as much as I don't want kids personally, because I selfishly just kind of want to live the life that I live.
Totally.
It's one of those that I love the sincerity and just honesty that kids bring. They'll say things and it's just so pure because they don't have to lie. There's no reason for them to lie. They don't know what a lie is. So they'll just tell you how things are. And sometimes, I often think back to a friend of mine's kid when I lived with them and we were playing hide and seek and his kid was had the safe zone if you didn't get tagged after you got found was his bed. And I remember he was running to his room into his bed and I was, doing the thing where you don't actually run after them. And he as he's running, he goes, "Oh, watch out for the Legos." And I stopped and I was like, why don't you pick up the Legos? If you pick up your Legos when you're done with them, you don't have to worry about stepping on them and they're not in your way. And then he just kind of got a befuddled look on his face. And I think he was about 5 or 6 at the time. And he just goes, well, my daddy says I only have to pick them up before I leave to go to my mom's. So I don't need to pick them up. And part of me was just like, you missed the point entirely. But then as I thought about it from his perspective, I was like, I mean, that's also sound logic. You 100% were told that you just have to clean up your room before you leave. And that's not for another day.
Outside of that, that's the one thing, and there's nothing outside of that.
Nope.
Yeah.
And to me, I think that's so pure. But I think the thing, as I think about kids, is, you're talking about, he's good at drawing. He's interested in these things. And I think about how when we're young, we're kind of given this freedom to just explore and do whatever we want. And I'm trying to think of when do you lose that, at what age and why? And the only thing I can really think of is that at some point someone tells you you're not good at this and therefore you stop. And that's the only thing I've come up with, but I don't know if there's any validity to that.
Huh. Yeah. I mean, even when it kind of stops too, when you get out of high school and you have to choose okay, I'm going to go to college for a specific thing. I'm not going to get a liberal arts degree. I'm going to go to college for something super specific. And we think that we have to but I guess there is hobbies and stuff still. And I try to expose him to every single possible hobby, even though he's 5. I try to risk him to where I'm like, dude, who cares if you fail? I've ruined so many things, taking things apart. I can't even tell you lots of things that even were expensive. And I think as long as they brought up to that, hey, failing literally does not matter. And as long as you're trying hard and trying a lot of things and realizing that failing makes you better, I think that you don't even ever have to even lose that. What you're talking about, I don't think you even have to. Yeah.
It's funny, 2 things, and I'll kind of end it on this just because I feel like I've taken so much of your time. The first thing is I feel like, my wife had pointed out when we were flying, I forget where, but on some of the flights they have those on board TVs. And so they have just a gamut of things that you can watch. And so she was watching a few different TED Talks, 10, 15 minute TED Talks. And she kind of pokes me and then is kind of points and then was turned off my screen of what I was watching and then put it on that. And I took my headphone off for a minute. She goes, "Oh, this reminds me of you." And I started watching it, and this lady, and again, I've told this story a couple of times, and I never can remember this lady's name. But she talks about, it starts off by going, when we're young, we always get asked the question, what do you want to be when you're older, when you grow up? And it's always a singular thing. What do you want to be? What one thing do you want to be? And so she was talking about how, growing up, and she was like, I was interested in a lot of things. Like I grew up and I started this thing, whatever it happened to be. But then like I lost interest in it. And then I picked up another thing and I, eventually lost interest in that. And she goes, but those things, even if I'm not taking them to the the apex of where it can go, I still amassed that knowledge. I still amassed those experiences, and sometimes those experiences and those knowledges, the knowledge that you attain, can present itself somewhere else down the line. And she goes, I think it's when I realized that there's what she had kind of coined the term multi-potentialite, that you're interested in a lot of things and you have a curiosity to learn a lot, but that it doesn't have to be for anything other than just your own personal knowledge and experiences that you're gaining. 100%. It doesn't have to be for something. And that's a concept as I get older that I realize we do it to so many people, where it's like, you're this, kind of going back to, when I was saying, like, was it hard for you to adjust not being, Justin from Sleeping with Sirens or Justin from touring or whatever, that I feel like when we talk about people, we talk about them in such a singular thing, like this is how we know them or what we know them to do, and that's all they are to us until for some reason when we describe them to people. And I think back about the multi-potentialite thing so often because I feel like that's such a thing that has caused, I think, a lot of people to not have something to I guess that brings them happiness. Like they're like, well, I do this job and then I have to do this, and it's all these things you have to do. And it's like, at some point you can do something for yourself, and it doesn't have to be for any other reason than I enjoy it and it brings me happiness. And I think we lose that somewhere along the way too.
Yeah, no. Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of my, like what I was saying with, electronics, that's kind of my outlet, and even woodworking too. Like I build the cabinets that the stuff goes into, like the actual wood part. And like,
you build guitars too?
Well, I don't.
Are you a luthier too?
I am a luthier. I cannot claim that.
Okay.
But I mean, I sometimes I struggle with, I'm like, okay, am I wasting my time? Like, what is the point of this? Like, how is this productive? Because like that's what we're all working towards, is like being productive, and like, we have to work 9 to 5, and then you don't have to work 9 to 5. Like you don't always have to be productive. Rest is so important. Rest and revitalization. That's what keeps you going. And you can ask any major business leader that's prominent, they're going to be like, oh, I get, they probably take tons of vacation. They rest. And for me, rest is not sitting on the couch necessarily watching Netflix. It's rest to me is working on something like electronics or building something out of wood. That's rest to me. And that's, yeah.
I think, as even though I've joked that, you do all these things that could make you money and you choose not to, I think, it just kind of dawned on me. I think you do these things because maybe it gives you a sense of that life that you left, potentially, without the stresses and without any of the needing to have to do it for survival or to do anything. But it allows you to still kind of be involved in that space, in that world that meant so much to you and gave you all these enriching experiences, but you get to do it on your own time, and it doesn't bring forth any of the negative side of those things for you. And I feel like as I kind of think about it and think about it from that perspective, I kind of think maybe that's why maybe you do that.
Definitely. I'm sure that's definitely part of it. And that's kind of like the same thing that I think of when there's bands that are having tons of fun and they're trying to make it. It's like, well, part of the fun that you're having currently is because you haven't made it. Like, it becomes different, when you don't have money for food or a place to stay. It's no longer, and you have to do it. like it becomes different, than when you're playing with your friends in a garage. Like that's, I mean, both are fun, but even traveling in a van versus a bus, like everybody's like, oh, like a bus, and the bus is great. It has pros and cons, just like the van does. But like when you're in a van, you can't just be like mad at one of the other band members and retreat to your bunk or the back lounge. Like they're right there. You can't escape them, and they're there at all times. And you can look out, and like that's a good thing. I'm saying, like, all be in the same area and laugh and have fun. Some of my best memories are in the van, as where you go into the bus and you all retreat back into your bunks, or it's kind of hard to look out the window because they're heavily tinted and like, blind. And I mean, yeah, it's the discovery process.
You actually, that kind of made me think of something too, where it's almost like the touring in a van is akin to obviously not having resources. It's almost like, pre-internet, pre-cell phone, where it's like you literally had to interact with the people around you and the environments you're in, versus we'll say the bus is getting technology and getting things that you can to escape the interactions with the people you're actually there with. Like I know it's a really weird analogy, but like it kind of, I think, fits, because it's like you literally have to, you can't go anywhere. You have to be in it. You have to be present. You have to be accountable and manage, your relationships, because you are in such close proximity that there's no other way to do it other than doing that, versus, getting the luxury and the affordances of technology and space and so forth, to where then it's like, well, what do you do? Well, I already see you all the time, so I'm just going to go retreat and go do whatever. And you kind of lose a little bit of that connection and that human element, I think, when you kind of get that. Mm-hmm. Personally, I mean, it's funny when I've done some interviews on buses before, pandemic and all that, and people were like, oh, it must be so cool. And I was like, not really. Like, you ever been on a bus? Like, I know it seems like it's cool, but it's like, okay, like the front lounge is basically like someone's tiny, like, studio apartment living room. And you're constantly having to be like, oh, excuse me. And then you walk through bunk alley, which is usually just a cluster of people's shoes and whatever, and people trying to sleep. And I go, and then if you're in the back lounge, it's even smaller. And usually it's just everyone's bags and everything else that, doesn't fit in the front or in the bunks. And I go, so really it's like super cramped, and there's like 12 people in a space that would be comfortable for about maybe 5 or 6, but there's like 12 people. Yeah. So no, it's not actually great or glamorous. It's really not. And it makes you, when you're invited, at least for me, when I'm there to do a job, and then if I know the person, hang out for a little bit, the job part makes me feel like I'm in everyone's way. When I at least get to hang out, it's different. Like the dynamic feels a little bit different, but I still feel like I'm imposing on someone's personal space. And like, maybe that's just a me thing, but yeah, I would much rather not be on the bus and hanging out with people personally, but because it's I don't know, it's just not what it's cracked up to be. I mean, that's like, I got left on Periphery's bus after talking to Spencer, and they were like, oh, we're gonna go do Pokemon Go, and they just left me while I was packing up all my stuff. And then I was like, I legitimately don't know if I can leave, because I don't know at the time I didn't know the lock code for buses, even though they're pretty much universal. So I was like, I don't think I can leave, because then the bus is going to be unlocked and there's no driver, no nothing. Like, I'm just literally the only one on this bus. And I was like, I guess I'm just going to sit here until they come back. And like a few people, when I posted a video on Instagram or whatever, I was like, same thing, like same story. I was like, I guess I'm just here now. And a friend of mine was like, dude, next time when that happens, he goes, if I would have seen that in time, I just would have texted you and been like, hey, here's the code. Typically it's the universal code to lock the doors. If that ever happens again, he goes, that's so weird. They just left you. I was like, yeah, I guess there was, I mean, I don't play Pokemon Go, but I was like, I guess there was like a big thing of like block away and they needed to go get it to whatever. And I was like,
I don't know about that either.
Yeah. And they were like, yeah, that sounds like the Periphery guys. They're really into like nerdy gaming stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, literally, they literally left me on their bus. And then I was like, yeah. this is awkward and weird. And then when they came back, they're like, oh, you're still here. And then I explained, I was like, yeah, I didn't know what to do.
They're like, oh, what are you doing here still?
Well, and then I told them, I was like, yeah, I just didn't know the lock code. And they're like, oh, yeah. Cause they're like, yeah, our door doesn't, or yeah, something. And they're like, yeah, not a problem. And then they're like, all right, well, enjoy the rest of your day now. And I was like, yeah, that was very weird. I don't think I ever want to be in that situation again. It's just so awkward.
Oh, yeah, that's funny. Definitely awkward.
What, I would say, what do you have to plug online or anything? Because that's usually what I do at this point. But I, I know you don't really have anything.
Oh, I got necessarily. Something, hey, if you're listening and you follow me on Instagram, don't unfollow me if I post a picture. That's my plug.
Do you notice that people leave when you post a specific thing?
Usually, if it's not that's in a band, they unfollow me. So, for whatever reason. The thing is, I used to have I think I had about 25,000 followers, and over the course of the years, as I post, I'm like, wait a second, he's not traveling with them anymore. So they'll gradually. I still I'll gain followers, but I'll lose more than what I gain. So eventually, I think I'll find. Eventually, I think it'll be. It's been around 8,500. I don't know what I'm at now. It's been that for a while now, so I think that's a pretty stable number. But at first, it was super depressing to me. Just I'm like, no, where's all my followers? But then I was like, oh, I don't care anymore.
It's so interesting to think about. That as a pseudo commodity or how it's attached to self-worth, where it's again, like I was saying earlier, because you're not actually, I can't, that probably actually compounded onto why you kind of felt the way you did, after trying to find who you are as you to everybody, because then it's I'm posting what my life is, and in theory that's what people want to see, but then all of a sudden it's well, now that I'm not attached to this thing, now no one cares what I do or who I am, and it's oh my god, that it would be, I feel that'd be so traumatizing to realize oh my god, my everyday existence is no longer valuable to somebody.
Yeah, it was a little depressing, but I got over it, and I mean, like I said, though, it is still when I post something, it's partly in my head. I'm I have this picture. I'm oh, I need to post. Still, for whatever reason, I still think of that, and it definitely shuffles what I put on and what I don't. So,
you should just create another account and just post the other things that you're into.
Well, I do on my Snapchat. Snapchat is just I post quite a bit on there, and it's just whatever. A lot of it's just me being really stupid. But yeah, I feel complete freedom to post on there.
It's another medium. The bar I work, we started a group. They put me in a group Snapchat thing, and I was I left it within a minute of me getting at it. I was I don't really use this. We have a group text already for all of us. I don't need another form of something that I have to keep up with. I'm done. I don't need to. And then when someone gave me a bunch of shit about it sort of initially, and then I made the comment, I go, do you use Instagram? I know I don't see you very often on there. And they're like, no, not really. I go, cool. I'm going to create a whole group text, a DM on that. And then I'm just going to start flooding that. And I go, and they're like, well, I'm not going to follow and I'm not going to pay attention. I go, exactly. So that's why I left this. I'm not super active on Snapchat. And when I do post, it's just probably me walking the dog or doing something, but I don't care to use that medium necessarily. And I was but it's weird that make you feel like you have to be a participant on these things. And it's I absolutely 100% do not. That's actually why I'm really excited that I think if I have someone after talking to them tonight to do my podcast socials, I might severely drop off and be more like you and kind of almost hope that people stop following me. Because I'm sure maybe your Facebook isn't this bad anymore, but the amount of people whose profile pictures are them playing a guitar or playing drums or a show photo or whatever that start trying to I probably have a good 60 people in my friend request that are all that. Yeah. And I'm I am 100% not going to accept you because I know as soon as I do, I'm going to get the inevitable,
Yeah.
hey, like my band page and like all these things. And it's like, no, I 100% do not want to. Like,
Oh, yeah. No, definitely can relate with that. That's for sure. Oh my goodness. Like,
but
hey, can you send Kellen this our band? I'm like, what? You want me to text him right now and send like you want me to do that? You think that's something I'm gonna do? I'm like,
yeah, 100%.
hell
Please do
no.
that. 100%.
I don't owe anything.
I think
Oh,
it's funny to me because, like, in doing this, I have made connections with people that, in theory, could, get me in touch with somebody else. But more oftentimes than not, I typically never do that. Like, because I feel like because I never want the person to feel like our actual friendship only exists because of like I was saying earlier, what I can gain off of you.
yeah, yeah.
And to me,
Yes.
it's like, it's never that thing to me where I want that because it feels disingenuous and I don't want it. And some people have said like you're probably missing out on so many opportunities to grow your network because you're afraid to be like, hey, if as someone once said, they're like, what you should do is when you get done with something and if the person seemingly enjoyed their time talking with you, you should be like, hey, like, if you could, and if the person's into it, put in a feeler for me and just be like, hey, like, or, hey, I'm going to DM this person, let them know that, like, it's going to probably get lost in the many, many DMs they'll get. But, just try to network like that. And I was like, even that feels disingenuous because it's like, I don't know. It doesn't seem like a thing I ever want to do because I just feel like I'm taking advantage of someone's status or something. I don't know. Like it's a very weird thing that I don't enjoy. And it probably is it's probably a reason why I don't get some of the people that people think I should be able to get because I just don't do that. But then adversely, like you said, I wish I almost had that tenacity or the dumbfoundedness of just being like, yes, Kellen, and you're all that stands in the way of me getting my music to him and then getting signed. So like, fuck it, do that for me, please. And you should.
Yeah.
But I also feel like no one would come on my show if I kept doing that. If I'm like, okay, well, know these people, so now put me in contact with these people. Like I have adopted the philosophy that, and the podcast has taught me that things will happen when they're supposed to, with whom they're supposed to. And you just kind of got to sit back and let life happen.
Yeah. No, I think that you've got your head on right with that. I mean, for sure.
Well, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for doing this. I watched one that you did actually with Kellen from a long time ago. It looked like it was on one of your tours on the bus, and you looked like you were interviewing each other, which I didn't really understand the premise.
Was it really weird?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I couldn't tell because the weird thing was it was for a channel that existed, but it almost made it the way I kind of interpreted it was it almost seemed like it was your channel or a company that you had started or something. And so you were interviewing Kellen, but Kellen was interviewing you. And the whole time I was like, I don't know what's going on. And I feel like there's a joke somewhere that I didn't know the setup for. And then I tried going to the comments to figure out what was going on because I was like, I must be missing something. And all the comments were just like, Justin's so cute. Oh, Kellen's, they're so funny. And when oh my God, I died when he said blank. And I'm like, all right, that didn't help me at all. So like, I was just like, I don't know. And then you guys just kept going like, I think a minute into it, you're like, all right, we'll be back in 5 minutes after this commercial. And then you start hawking the channel's like gear. So that's why I was like, I don't know what this is or what the point of this is. And I'm so confused.
Oh my gosh.
Because I was trying to get
for flipping music.
Yes, that was what it was for.
Yeah. He would interview bands. We were just nuts. So like we turned his interview into that. And then then after the fact, he added some special editing and stuff to make it funnier. But we did that a couple times with flipping music stuff. And Brian Starr, two interviews we hijacked back in the day.
Yeah,
those were fun.
because sometimes I'll look at those just to kind of get a sense of pacing of like how you talk or things like that as like studying. But like that, I saw that and I was like, this does not help me at all. And then I was like, if that's, I don't even know what this is, so I'm just not even gonna bother.
Yeah, dude, I'm still exactly like that, to be honest. But I guess I've gotten a little more. Yeah,
I was gonna say, how can you not be that way?
I'm extremely sarcastic, and I love the most awkward. Have you seen I Think You Should Leave, that new comedy on Netflix?
No.
Dude, oh my gosh, watch that. Everybody watch that.
It's funny though, because like my frame of reference for stuff, like I actually was just calling my friend for our housewarming party because we're doing one in a couple of weeks. And I didn't reach out to him because he just bought a new house himself and he lives in Lansing and he just had another kid. So I was like, you got enough going on. I don't need you to come down to my house for like this sort of vanity thing of like, hey, everyone come look at my house that I've lived in for 12 years. But it was this thing of like, my wife was like, you should call him. And I was like, all right. So I called him the other day and he's like, oh, I think I'll come down. And I was like, all right. And so my wife's like, see, you got to call your friends. And I was like, yeah, I should. But I was laughing with him because, you know, and it reminds me probably how you are with, you know, Matty and everybody. When you see them, you just pick right back up where you last left off. Yeah. And so I was like, dude, I made a comment the other day and I wish you were here and I knew you were. And I was like, but we're going to do tacos for the food that we're doing. And like my mother-in-law works in the cafeteria at a school. And so she got like the taco meat, like she could buy like bulk taco meat for real cheap. So we're like, all right, that works. And I was like, dude, low key, I'm really excited. And I hope it tastes as good as the taco meat like that I used to have in high school, like when for Taco Tuesdays and stuff. Like that was the best. And then he was like, oh yeah, like something about that like real shitty like lunch meat like was just so good. And then I was like, I hope. And I was like, and this is the joke I made. And I was telling her, asked my mother-in-law, I was like, do you guys have Gels, GEHLS, nacho cheese, like it comes in the can, like a 5-gallon can? And I was like, because I don't know what it is about that. Like I know it's garbage and it's probably just synthetic cheese, quote unquote, but it was so good. And I remembered it by brand once I started working in restaurants. And I was telling my buddy, I go, and I made the joke, I go, because they were like Gels, and I was like, yeah, you know, Gels. And you know, and I go, oh, and I go, I'm sure if you were to buy some, you know, the Gel would be like, oh, Gel's eating good tonight. And then like they just looked at me and he goes, Simpsons. And I go, yep. And then I had to explain to my wife who Gil was from The Simpsons, how he's just always the background character who always is like working odd jobs. Like he was a car salesman in an episode. He sold a car. Oh man, he is one of my favorite bit characters that always randomly pops up. But like my friend, when I said that, he like just died laughing. And I was like, see, I was like, that's why we're friends still. And he goes, oh, same with my wife. Like I say jokes to her all the time. She doesn't laugh. She doesn't think anything's funny. And I was like, same with mine. And I was like, although I got her the other day and I knew it was a good one because she laughed. And I was like, because our dog tried eating the giant bumblebees we have. And I was like, Franks, don't eat the spicy flies. And then my wife just starts laughing uncontrollably. And she's like, spicy flies? I was like, yeah, they got stingers. They're spicy flies. And I was like, it's so stupid, but that's how my brain works. And now, coincidentally, like after like the last 2 weeks of me saying that, that's now what we call the giant bumblebees, is the spicy flies at the end of the driveway.
I love that.
That's, yeah, again, it's so dumb. It is absolutely stupid, but those are the kind of things like movie quotes and so forth that I think most men our age do live in movie quotes. And typically our wives are just sit there looking at us like we're idiots. And you're just like, I mean, you're not wrong.
Yeah. Very accurate, honestly.
But, I guess, yeah, I don't know if I'll see you at anything because it seems like you're always randomly at like NGR popping up, hanging out with people, but I don't know when you're going to be up here next. So
probably, the next show I go down there because Gabe, do you know Gabe? Oh, was he down there? No. Gabe, ex-drummer Sleeping with Sirens. He lives down there.
Possibly. So
he's down there a lot, but.
So Wikipedia was right. The band did the band move here, or most of the band move here at one point?
Everybody, let's see, everybody besides Nick and Jack live here, and
Really?
ex-members too. Yeah,
Huh.
yeah.
I saw that on Wikipedia and I was like, that band doesn't live here.
It like started here, honestly. Like it pretty much started here in Muskegon, like with For All We Know. For All We Know evolved into Sleeping with Sirens.
That's so weird. Because, I mean, it's weird thinking about that because I do the same thing with Law Dispute. Like,
Oh yeah,
I forget that they are not just a local band and that they have a really rabid fan base worldwide.
yeah.
But like when
It's
a
crazy.
band I was in at the time played at Skeletones before it became Mixtape,
Hmm.
they were playing at the DAC, a secret show before they went to Australia with Thursday. And like everyone left once they found out that that was happening and went to that instead. But it's still weird to me
Perfect.
because like when people are like, I love Law Dispute, and I'm like, how the hell do you know about Law Dispute? Like they're a local band to me.
Yeah, yeah. No, I
So
same. I remember I saw them. I was like in Cali or something, and I saw a poster on the wall at one of the venues, and it said Thrice with Law Dispute, and I'm like, what? They're still a band, and they're opening for Thrice? Like
well,
what?
yeah.
A lot of Thrice references today. I like it.
It's funny because I feel like I was going to make the comment that I feel like it seems like their career is one that you probably would have mirrored if you were to create your own solo project.
Be similar. Probably be similar.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff, newer stuff, I don't, or like the mid, like 2015, 2014. Some of the stuff I didn't really like too much when they got like kind of folky,
Mm,
but for the most part, I like most of their stuff.
they're a good band. It's funny because I'm that person who's like, oh, Artist in the Ambulance is probably my favorite of theirs. Although
Yeah. Oh, it's so good.
the one with like Hurricane and all that on it is probably my second favorite, which is probably the record you
Yeah.
don't like.
Sure.
But they lost me
I'd have to
entirely.
see
They
which
lost
one
me
that is.
entirely on the Alchemy Index. Like a lot of that, I was like, I get what you're doing, but I also don't feel like it was like half of this isn't
Yeah.
necessary to me.
I know. I liked only Fire on that Alchemy Index
Was
because it was
that the
like
one that
heavy
was
rock.
more rock? Yep. Okay, that's the one I liked. Yeah.
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 Yep. Same.
But great band. I'm hoping. I think we might go see them when they're in Detroit because we're going to be in Detroit for the off date for the Nothing More Atreyu run to hang out with some of the dudes. But I don't know. I don't like Bayside really, so that's kind of a problematic for me.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of Bayside either.
So that was my conversation with Justin, again, formerly of Sleeping with Sirens. It's funny. I've been going through, like I said, a lot of conversations I've had lately, and in person and for the podcast, where I just kind of, I always feel like there's something I learn and I try to apply to my life. And like I had kind of hinted at in the beginning of the intro, there's something about doing something that you do well, but not making it for other people, and it's actually kind of something I was thinking about a little bit in conjunction with going to see the movie Nope. I went and saw that yesterday as when I'm recording this, and there's a scene in the movie, and I'm trying to say this without spoiling anything for those that want to go see it. But there's a subplot of the movie, and basically a tragedy happens, and this person has kind of been able to make money off of this tragedy. And then subsequently, as they become an adult, there's something that happens in the current time. And when I was kind of thinking about it, the context of the movie, what does the story mean? What does the plot mean? And what's really hard is, I've been thinking a lot too about, especially when it comes to Jordan Peele movies and things in general, sometimes with art, we are so quick to make a rash decision so we can like talk about something, so we can be in the moment, we can be first, quote unquote first, whatever that means. But I don't think we stop to really appreciate what the art is, maybe utilize our own experiences that we have to form our own opinions. I think a lot of times we want opinions also kind of force fed to us. And how that relates actually to this Justin thing is I was kind of thinking about, like I said, I've been trying to apply this philosophy of, you don't always have to do something for a monetary gain. But after seeing the movie Nope, I was kind of thinking sort of about it from a different perspective, where sometimes I don't think we need to, or I guess the way I'm trying to still think about it or put it is, we sometimes try to monetize anything. anything we're good at. Like, and I think it even applies to junk. Like, with shows like, the Antique Hunters or Antiques Roadshow or, what are those fucking, God, it'd be better if I could remember what the show was called, but the show where basically they have the lockers or the storage wars. There we go. And essentially it's like, we try to monetize everything now. Oh, do you have junk? Don't throw it away. It could be worth something. Keep it. And you just kind of end up cluttering your life with all these things that you don't need, these things that could be something, and I feel like it just causes so much unwanted stress, so many unwanted things in your life, just clutter. And it becomes one of those things where I kind of thought about that, like I said, in conjunction to the movie of monetizing, horrific events, like, oh, I have these props from this horrific thing, I know a lot of people collect weird shit. So, I mean, it's one of those things, like I said, I've been kind of thinking about it and monetizing things in a completely different facet. And like I said, I've been thinking about Justin's thing where he was just like, yeah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And the more I thought about that, it just kind of really has kind of put a lot of things into perspective of just like how much we as a society monetize things, literally things or skills. And it's like, we don't need to do that. And I think there's something so pure about that the more I thought about it, and the fact that it's like, I don't think we make things for us anymore. I mean, I've been off Facebook tentatively for about a month now. And when I say I'm off of it, like I still have it because I need it for the podcast, but it's not on my phone, and I pretty much don't really use it for much of anything. But it's interesting to think about how we even sort of monetize the perception of who we are. Like, oh, I have this new thing, I whatever, that we spend a lot of time monetizing things. Like I saw a friend of mine made it to where you can subscribe to their Instagram, thus allowing you to support them financially. And it was just an interesting concept to kind of see how much in our world we monetize everything. I don't know. It's been an interesting thing that I've noticed. And like I said, coming back to this, knowing that I was going to be putting out this chat very soon, I've kind of been thinking about it a lot more. I'm actually reading a book right now about the Wu-Tang Clan recording their record that they put out, that Martin Shkreli, I think is how he said his name, the Pharma Bro, that he bought for like $1 million or something like that. And even in that book, it's talking about how art has value. It has intrinsic value. People are willing to spend tons and tons of money because, for the most part, it's a one of one. And how music has become demonetized, devalued, because it's one of however many copies it literally sells. That's how many there are, or more than, but like, you get the point. But it's one of those where even in reading that book, in the foundation of them doing it, the whole foundation started on how do we stop making people devalue music? How do we make it just as important as art? Because it is. And to see how they have and I'm not done with I'm not even halfway through the book at this point, but I mean, obviously I know the end result and I know what happens is essentially they created this one-of-a-kind piece of art album, and it was a one of one. And it sold for $1 million. It's I think the most expensive record sold, literally. But it was one of those things where to see, even that, how because of something being an oversaturated version of itself, it devalues, it demonetizes itself over time. Like I said, it's kind of been a concept that's been coming into my life a lot more, and I'm kind of noticing it. So I'm trying to figure out like how do I feel about it? How does it play into things? So all that said, it's been, like I said, I've been thinking about this conversation and just Justin as a whole a lot lately. So I'm very excited to get this episode out. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm going to start wrapping things up because, like I said, this was a long-ass episode and I'm kind of rambling on, but this is something I really have been thinking about. So I'm excited to talk about these things and these concepts. If you'd like to keep up with Justin, I'll make it simple. You can follow him at Justin Van Hook on Instagram. As you heard, he doesn't really post, and when he does, sometimes he loses people. So there is that. If you would like to keep up with the podcast, you can find us Brew Speak Pod everywhere on socials. If you'd like to support us monetarily, if you're so inclined to, you can go over to patreon.com/BrewSpeakPod. We have access to the shows as soon as they're done. There's bonus content up over there. Go check it out, see if it's something you're interested in doing. And last but not least, I want to thank our podcast sponsors for supporting the show, starting with Rockabilia. Go to rockabilia.com and pick up some garments. They have like 5,000 items in their store. I am sure there is something you are going to want. There's got to be something you're going to want. So go check them out. Pick up something. Use our code BREWtally at checkout. Take 10% off your total purchase order. Go to the Bean Bastard, beanbastard.com. Go pick up some delicious coffee. They got body scrubs. They got soaps. They have so many things. And if you're in the Buffalo, New York area, head on over to the brick and mortar store and go check that out. I'm sure they would be greatly appreciative of that. And last but not least is On Point Pomade. I mean, Matty Mullins is the whole reason this episode happened, so can't help but shout him out. You keep your beard in here looking on point. Go over there, use our code BSP15 and take 15% off your total purchase order. And for the Brutally Speaking podcast, I am John, and I will talk to you all next week where I have the legendary Tony Foresta of Municipal Waste of Iron Reagan. That was a fucking fun chat. I am stoked to get that one out. That was a party time vibe. Lots of fun. Can't wait to bring it to you. I will see you all next week. Until then, have a good one.